Hi, my name's Nada Murphy, and when people ask me how long have I been an artist, I would say all of my life. I was thinking about this morning, exactly what point in time did I decide to be an artist, and how did I even know what an artist was when I was 3? But I think when I was 3, someone must have given me some sense that something to do with drawings had to be something about being an artist, and perhaps someone said to me, oh, you'll be a good artist. I don't know, but I know by the time I was 5 and sitting in what would now be known as pre-primary, I suppose, but Bub's grade we used to call it, I did a portrait of my teacher, and at the end of the day she kept the piece. Everybody said it was such a good likeness. So that was the first time a piece of my work actually was given away. And then in high school I enrolled in art and defended that turf furiously because I was going to be an artist. We lived in an area of Melbourne where the actual neighbourhood I was in was about 3 kilometres away from the school I went to, and which was also another few kilometres away from an artistic community. And in that area was ceramics and sculpting and all sorts of lovely things going on. Some of my printmaking background goes back to high school and working with etching. And in my high school final year, I enrolled in mathematics as well. I've never really called myself a nerd before, but a passion for how do things work and how does it all fit together, sort of this inquiring mind. I went to Melbourne University in the 70s as one of the first women definitely the first woman in my family, but it was not a common thing for women to go to university at that time. So I ended up with an arts enrolment because I got a place and I got a scholarship. People said to me then, go to university because that's a good thing. You might never get another opportunity to do that, but you can always paint. So hidden in there, of course, is the message that that's more valuable than that. Anyhow, I did that and I enrolled in fine art. My time at Melbourne University was learning something about the Renaissance arts and quite a bit about psychology and something about criminology, and certainly I learned that I wasn't an economist. Pity really, because maybe if I'd paid more attention in that class, the trajectory might have been different. But anyhow, here we are all these years later. So that's how I started in art, and when I left Melbourne University I came to Western Australia as a very young woman. Went to Perth Tech to study painting, drawing and printmaking. Painting, drawing and printmaking in this space now. You'll notice that there's now another couple of techniques that have been thrown in over the years, and one of those is glass. I decided that I really wanted to learn how to work with glass probably quite a long time ago as well, but very difficult to do. So ultimately that started about 13, 14 years ago, which actually comes to about the same point when I started working seriously on this river system. So that's one trajectory into my arts practice. The other trajectory is water. Why do I spend so much time painting stories of water? And that goes back to very early childhood too. When I was growing up in Melbourne, we had a drought. It also impacted seriously on the cityscape where I grew up, but it was not like it is now. The cityscape really was a little suburb within walking distance to the Birrarung as we know her now, but it was the Yarra River. And the Yarra River was a muddy clay river, which I thought was the way rivers were as a child. I have two brothers and one sister, and we'd all go to the river every summer. I have some photographs in my memorabilia with my mum sort of supporting me to swim in a dam on the family property, which is now the suburbs of Melbourne. And I think in my bones, I see rivers as a place of safety. Even though they're not, they can be treacherous. But if you have an understanding and a knowledge of rivers, you can be safe in rivers. I didn't learn to swim in the ocean, so when I first came to Western Australia and found the Indian Ocean, it was quite daunting. Tugs and pulls and things that go on. Rivers can run deep and they can carry you into trouble, so you have to know how to live with rivers, and you have to listen to them and you have to understand them. But I think that's the foundation of this work coming through. And at some point when I started looking more closely at the top end of the river that comes through our city here in Perth, it wasn't looking okay. It wasn't looking like it was happy. It didn't look like it was a healthy river to me. And I started to go, well, is this just an impression I've got? Let's find out more. So my first exhibition in this space with Mossenson's Galleries was Echoes of the River, which looked at the story of the top end of the rivers. The second one was Tracks, which took me right across Western Australia, going through all the top ends of all the rivers that we could find inland, and landing up on 80 Mile Beach and going further north to a place called Wommadaan, where there was a big controversy over a gas hub going in some 10 years and more back. And then coming right back down to home ground here and looking at the estuary in the Birrarung here. Estuaries are full of interesting things and intriguing, and I knew that the state of water globally was more and more desperate. You can hear about these stories all around the globe. So I thought, well, I need to make a comparison between this space here in the Birrarung and another. And I discovered there was a lovely group of artists working in Tasmania doing exactly that, and they were working with a scientist over there, so I had to get myself there somehow. So in January I went to Pipe Clay Lagoon on, I think it's called South Arm, the peninsula that runs just east of Hobart, and joined this group and started looking at what was going on over there in a science artist model. And I'm now working with a scientist who's based here. As you get to know other artists, you find out they're a rich resource of knowledge that is not just about art. One of my colleagues here makes these amazing sculptures that all spin and weave around. I mean, the balance factor in his work is extraordinary, Peter Zappa. And he's a man who makes things with his hand, and his background is plumbing. And one of the things you learn when you educate yourself is you learn how to use your hands. And I value that really so much that I try to maintain the connection with the handmade always, because that was the culture I grew up in. My mother made things, my father made things, my grandfather started from scratch making tools. So this was the bedrock of my Australian story, and probably the bedrock of most cultures, because over time, coming to the concept of time, things change and shift. So now we have computer-driven models where the hands are removed, and I have some concerns about that. So I carry on being a maker with my hands. I left the practice of psychology unexpectedly about 20 years ago because I had a health crisis that put me in a difficult position, and I could no longer really do that job very well because of needing to pay attention to my own health needs. One of the first things I did was use painting as a baseline for me to rebuild my own health. And people would come in. I have a studio space which has always been quite a communal space, and people would come in to that space and learn to draw, or it initially wasn't intended as a class, but what I found was people would defer to me often and say, how would you do this, Nada, or how would you do that? So ultimately we started to run a little painting group out of that. From that I ended up going to do some amazing things. I went on a journey up north where I frequent quite often, or used to at least, and I was invited to be the arts tutor on an art adventure, I think, but it was on a cattle station right up in the very north of Western Australia, and 10 days intensive. It was huge fun. Magic country, and like you just start to, and you learn so much just by going and being, so that's been part of my journey. I was very lucky to be taught at Perth Technical College, St Bridget's College, by a wonderful woman who really taught me the value of trusting that connection between heart and hand, like being able to pursue what your own drivers are and let it come through. So what drives me to work on rivers is really because I know water is so fundamental. It's the fundamental ingredient of life. Working as a psychologist, I was also dealing with the fundamentals of life. That's a sort of space which enables you to create objects that have the potential to tell story and to also impart knowledge. And I guess that's really what is the space I've come to, is to be confident enough to make an exhibition that does exactly that it tells a story, but it also has the capacity to impart knowledge. These two pieces of work are a meditation on the river exhibition I had called Echoes of the River, sort of looking at what's happened over time there, salinisation of the land that had been going on since we started taking trees out. So this piece is about the riparian zone, which is the technical term for the riverbank, and this one is more about the salt that I saw coming into the rivers. Australia's water system is very much underground, and salt lakes pop up all over the place. They're everywhere. It's called a paleo channels, the underground system. And in Western Australia, so many eons ago, all of this was underwater. So the country is actually salty. So one line of argument says, well, it's salty in the first place, you're going to get salt water. You take the trees out from the riparian zone, you take the trees out, it helps the salt table come up, and you get more salty surface, which becomes less arable. Right from the get-go at settlement, what happened was the land was surveyed for its suitability for agriculture, and people started chopping trees down. It was part of the brief. If you got a piece of land, you had to chop the trees down and put some sheep on it. So these two pieces are really talking about that history. Wire glass, well, I was fascinated with it to start with, but it also had this sort of capacity to speak about that kind of earthy, crusty stuff that was going on. So this one's about salt, as I said, and this one's about the riverbank. And it's also very organic material, silica. These vessels don't hold water. Put water into these, it runs away. And all rivers have that transient quality of the water moving across time. My dear painting teacher, a very powerful, strong woman. Her name was Marjorie Bussey. I did drawing and painting with Marjorie. These were sort of classes that you went to at 6 o'clock at night. You had to do figure work, basically live drawing. Just went, right, get the kind of bones down, you know, how you do it. So whack, 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 maybe 6 strokes. And she would work her way around the room to all the people in the class, of course, and she turned up here on my right side. And she said to me, "You're not going to do any more, are you?" It was kind of like both an instruction and asking me to call on my own judgment. But you know, it was a very valuable lesson I got in those 2 sentences, because she also said, trust yourself, trust your hand and your heart. I went on to work with Marjorie a lot. She took me out bush. My son was very small. A lot of people say when you have children, you know, you won't get any art done. Well, if I was going to get anything done, I had to get it down quick. And it took me away from this really, you know, laboured kind of process that I won't say everybody goes through, but for me, I went through this laboured process, and I can still do that. You know, what are all the details and all the dots and all the points, and have I got the light right, and is this correct? You know, judgment, running all the time into whack it down and get it right. Marjorie on my right shoulder saying, trust yourself. So some of those bush trips were part of that, like working fast and clean, and then we had retreats. Some of that was getting into all that story that's not actually in your conscious space, that sits behind somewhere. It's just out of reach unless you sort of give yourself time and space to ground yourself and get hold of it. What is it that is making this thing that's in front of you the most important object in the world? I mean, I certainly have a serious side. I probably was the most serious kid on the block. And so I'm tackling serious issues, but at the same time you can laugh about all the funny things that come up. And there's lots of funny things, aren't there? I've been asked to put a label on myself. I find it really hard. I don't like labels much. The primary reason I don't like labels is because I think they limit people. You know, you run into the boundary of that label, and somehow that's as far as you're allowed to go. And it's not really what a creative life's about. A creative life leaps over the boundary into a new space when it's time to do that. So, but anyhow, I've got this new label, and I kind of tongue-in-cheek put moving from landscape artist to ecological warrior. I'm probably the most peace-loving woman that you can meet. So the warrior is a bit funny. But anyhow, it's like, and I can't see myself strapping myself to the front of a bulldozer, but I do see myself defending these small territories that are very precious, that once they're lost, they can't be regained. Environment is the place that you're within. Like at the moment, we're in this amazing gallery space, which is an environment for artistic people to grow. So I prefer ecological because, as I've disclosed, it's a people business I'm in. It's always about the interactions between our space and our work. On the river here, on the Yarra, you go walking along the riverbank and you'll see people sailing in it, fishing in it, or walking along the bank or rowing boats in it. So many people use Crawley Bay to take a family picnic, and having a ferry come and go might be very handy for some of them, but for others they've lost their special place. So these special places have to be defended, don't they, somehow? Why do people say don't do art because you won't ever make money out of it? Why can't artists make a decent living? That's a very good question, and I think there's a lot of artists in the community who would come on board with that same question. I don't have the answer for that, of course, apart from the fact that I do believe that artists need to be recognised for their contribution. I mean, as an artist trying to survive, you need enough to be able to proceed with. So it is a very important question. But I think art in our community has so many layers, like carrying story, recognising a point in history, like documenting the story of place, speaking up about the difficult to speak to issues, having a voice. So that's all the kind of meaning of the work, I suppose, the driver in the work. Yeah, why be an artist in this world? Well, we need you to be, okay? We need artists. We absolutely need artists. Otherwise, I'll be very lonely to start with. I have this vision too. We're in a gallery full of artworks at the moment, but I see it in its stripped down state as well, when it's got nothing on the wall. And it just becomes an empty box then. I went into a football stadium a couple of years ago for a meeting, and there wasn't one piece of artwork in this, and it was an underground space with kind of grey-white walls right round, and I thought, no soul in this space. So why be an artist? You bring something special. Sometimes your work doesn't work at all. You know it doesn't work, and the whole world knows it doesn't work, and you have to allow yourself to have those moments when you kind of go, ditch that one, move on. And why be an artist? That you learn so much about yourself, and you learn so much about your community. You learn about joy, you learn about the flip side, you learn about every emotion possible, and you become richer in so many ways.